really wanted a simple concept, not minimalist to the point that you know, Tatiana is on the floor reading a letter, but still, it's a fairly simple, clean line stage, raked stage. That does have still windows and doors, but and elements of scenic elements are certainly there. But the concept is simple, as the story is so powerful. The cast, I won't touch on that one, but it's fantastic. So it didn't really need so much clutter on stage. So we have in our director someone that believes that without the clutter on stage, we can tell the story the way we want it. Costumes are period costumes. They are 1820s. We really went into huge trouble finding the costumes that will be the period costumes, so that will help support the story the way we felt it was.
You want my take on love?
Yes.
Well, I mean, if the question is whether love is an illusion in this opera, I think definitely it's very real. I mean, certainly for Tatiana, when you see that letter scene, I mean, it's as you said, it's an extraordinary scene. It's 25 minutes approximately of just one woman alone on stage, pouring everything she's got into this letter to this guy. And it's like this life-changing moment for her.
It's unique.
And it's incredible, and that stays with her to the very final scene where she finally it's like, I can't take it anymore. Yes, I still love you, you know. And well, one of the things that's really interesting in the opera is I mean, and it also does depend on how you stage it. How much is Onegin really responding to that? You know, how much is he denying what he really feels when he rejects her? And you know, there's all kinds of levels to this, that ways you can interpret it. But it really is. It's all these different characters and their relationship to love. And Lenski himself, you know, has this passionate lover of Olga, and then it gets tested also when she ends up sort of seeming like she's going to run off with one, you know, but she's just interested in flirting basically with Onegin. But it's an interesting thing because it almost seems like the wrong people are together, that
right.
Olga and Onegin would be much better suited to each other, and Lenski and Tatiana, who are the people who are so ardent and open in the way they love the person they're with, are sort of have ended up with the wrong person. So it's a sort of a drama about misintersection, you know, like you meet the right person at the wrong time, or there's two couples, but really two of them should be together who aren't together, and just sort of how things sometimes work out in life, you know, but also how these things can persist over time, and that really neither of them let go of those very formative moments that they had early in life.
But we can discuss it from 2 points of view. First of all, we have Pushkin, and what Pushkin wanted to convey in his novel. And the other side is, of course, Tchaikovsky, not on musical level, but biographically. What's going on with Tchaikovsky at the point when he decided to write this opera. So, should I start with Pushkin or with Tchaikovsky?
May I interject on behalf and say Pushkin all the way to Tchaikovsky?
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that?
Okay, how I see it with Pushkin. And this is, to some extent, should be explained from the little bit literary, not musical angle. And it's mostly about what is not in the opera, what is missing in the libretto. And what is missing in the novel, we have beginning, the letter, the difficult situation in the Larin's estate. Then Onegin suddenly became enemy to Lenski and the duel. And then we have very end, the last chapter in St. Petersburg, when suddenly Onegin in love with Tatiana. But in between, what is missing in the libretto and what was extremely important for Pushkin is why everything is changed at the end. on a musical level. It's about how he writes his opera. For Pushkin, it's different. He should explain how is it possible that in the beginning Tatiana is this provincial, she's 17 years old. And Onegin at this point is 26, so she's a child. She doesn't know much. She reads those terrible novels. All her understanding of love is very artificial. And Pushkin wants to move her to the end. And for Tatiana, this moment that, by the way, Pushkin is not telling us what's going on with Onegin. Onegin stays the same in the beginning and the end. But he is interested in Tatiana. For Tatiana, this first moment that she's suddenly starting to change is her love. So love is real, and love is an incredible power. And what's happening to Tatiana is she's starting to visit Onegin's estate. She realizes that she has a room full of books. She reads those books. She follows Onegin's notes. She's trying to understand him. So from this very female, old-fashioned reading in the beginning, she moves to male reading, serious reading, and she changes. So, and it's not only education. Her change, to some extent, is not motivated, only by love. We don't know how this little girl suddenly arrives to the capital. She attracts not only attention of her future husband, who is not just anyone. He is hero of the Napoleonic Wars. He covered with wounds. He is known to the Tsar. He is famous. He is rich. He is at the very top. And suddenly, Tatiana attracts him. And from Pushkin's notes, we know that not only him. Tatiana speaks to famous poets of the time. She feels that Moscow society is very plain and simple. She is interested in much more sophisticated community. And this is a community what Pushkin imagines as his circle. So he makes Tatiana someone who belongs to his circle. And this is what love does to Tatiana. And Onegin comes back to say, and of course he is in love. It's not just a girl from this little village, from a little estate. She is the most sophisticated lady in St. Petersburg. Naturally, he is in love. So,
I'm absolutely certain that Tchaikovsky is writing almost a new kind of opera in a small way here, because the reality is that the plot of Onegin is not really a plot. It's a series of tableaus, because he's very, very conscious of the fact that everybody in his audience, when this premieres in, what, 1878, I believe it is, when this premieres, they already know Onegin. It's part of their national identity. It's the fabric of what they would all know as educated readers. So he doesn't have to actually tell the details of all of the story. So we kind of get these snapshots of Tatiana sort of in age 1, and then sort of in age 2, we have kind of the horrid coming apart of the 4 of them, and then age 3, Tatiana as being now very, very sophisticated, having lived through the letter scene. So it seems almost interrupted from our standpoint, because we kind of like our dots more or less connected, right? And in Verdi, we get that as much as Verdi feels we need to have it. I mean, he's also very, very, very fastidious with his librettos. He was well known for driving his librettos absolutely crazy. But in this case, Tchaikovsky in some ways is the editor. He's the real chief editor of this. And I think he's just chosen sort of these moments in time in the evolution of somebody to show also how love evolves for one person but not another. The aspects of it that are illusory, and
answer existential questions. I'm a formalist in terms of literary knowledge.
No problem.
First of all, the thing I can tell you is I've never seen the opera, but just from your praising, what you're dealing with is quite obvious. The adaptation of a long poem, and Tchaikovsky has correctly, as you're outlining, really selected the main elements of the plot. Right? Because when I teach the novel, there isn't much to the plot. Right? The important point in reading the original is the Pushkin, Eugene Onegin character that's in the thing, where the weight of the narration is borne by Pushkin as narrator. Because unlike a prose novelist, if you're working with iambic tetrameter and a verse form, you have to express a minimal amount of content. You can't go on like Tolstoy in War and Peace, pages and pages about the Battle of Austerlitz. You have to get your point across. And what Pushkin does in the work is you learn a lot more about Pushkin and his attitudes toward literature, language, society, and his doppelganger, his alter ego, Eugene. Because in the beginning of the novel, he talks about my Eugene. We talked on, I met him on the Neville side, we had these conversations. So you can argue that really Eugene Onegin is Pushkin's double. And the thing is that the narrator, the Pushkin, changes over 8 chapters. It took him 7 years to write the work. He started around, he was like 25, ended up around 30. And if you read the work, you can see he changes in his attitude toward his characters. For example, yes, he depicts Tatiana as a girl formed by love novels. And at the end of the thing, he says, she was waiting to get married just to anybody. Right? That's what he says. Or in terms of Lenski. Lenski in Pushkin's characterization is a Weimar romantic. He's depicted as sort of dreamy, writing poetry, gets his genres mixed up. The narrator and Pushkin do not take him seriously at all.
It's almost as if he's pretending to take in the whole world into his poem.
Yeah, and Olga, an airhead,
right,
is basically what he describes her as. And the general, the fantastic scene in where her aunts have taken her to St. Petersburg to enter her into society. And she says, who, that fat general? Кто, это толстый генерал? And Pushkin drops you there. The next chapter, she's married, she's in the ball scene. So one of the things you have to realize is that he's left out, perforce, in stage adaptation, the important role of a narrator. He depicts you on stage the major elements of the plot and modulates that depiction by how he treats the characters, the music, and that sort of character depiction. My Eugene Onegin is a pretty cynical guy. He represents a recurrent type in Russian literature, the superfluous man fly. These people, such as Onegin, had everything taken care of for them. As gentry, they were given, for example, a serf boy when they were young to serve them hand and foot, literally putting on their socks and taking off their shoes. They weren't expected really to be serious. You didn't have to be. Your income was stable from your serfs, whether you had 30 or 3,000. They were your people. Because of the rigid social system, there were only 4 estates in Russia at the time: the nobility, the clergy, the bourgeoisie, and the serfs. Skipping classes was not easy. So they're pretty well in a fixed social situation, and because of the political developments in the 18th century, the nobility was perfectly willing to do as little as possible, live off the income of the estates, and not particularly worry about, say, like the English aristocracy, where the sons had to go out because there was law of primogeniture and they had to make their way through the world. They didn't have to do that. And so he surfeited with money, minimal education, you know, just sort of the surface stuff that will get you by in society. Make the appropriate quotes here. Say the wise thing about Adam Smith and how to run the estate.
Yes.
Run after ballerinas.
Right. Which could be the underlying reason why he rejects her, because in a literary vein, that's really what he thinks that he is going to do after he's married to her.
Well, he's had so much of it. And he's totally turned off by it, but he cannot get himself out of it. Tatiana goes into his library, and he's got everybody that he should be reading. But it bores the hell out of him. He finds nothing to stimulate, nothing to drive him to do something other than that empty type of society which he loves and hates at the same time. And that's one of the things that you can't get on stage. It doesn't come across because it's expressed in the role of the narrator.
Yeah, and also the whole notion of the womanizing too is very circumspect, or almost, I should say, circumstantial. We almost get a sense of it in Act 3 too, that there's just little comments dropped of what he's been doing with those 3 years intervening. And one gets the sense that that's what he's been doing all of his life, not just in those 3 years. And that this is really what the comfortable life of a Russian gentleman like Onegin is about.
In regard to the ballet scene, there's a ballet scene where Pushkin describes his cabinet, that is all of the little things that you saw in the picture, and then how he goes from his office or his home, goes to the ballet, walks in when the ballet is going on, stomps on people's feet to go over, getting into his seat, looks at it and says, "Oh, that one, she's been on the stage too long. Time to get her off the stage," and then goes off to a party. And this is a person who has no regard for anything other than his own comfort and his own self. And he stays that way, although he doesn't like it. He finds he's addicted to the life but can't break the addiction.
It's a familiar archetype in Don Giovanni, and I'm sorry, I thought I'd try and avoid mentioning this, but I guess I gotta say it. Our own analog on AMC television is Don Draper, who is very much addicted to that life as well. And of course, that show is about the dissolution of identity at a time where identity is already very fragile in the 1960s. And this, I wonder, is maybe we can draw a parallel even to that. That Onegin is addicted to something he knows perfectly well is going to kill him, or at least leave him bankrupt. And how can he get out of it?
Yeah, and in that, I think that's Pushkin's dilemma too. We were talking this on the phone, is that Pushkin lived this sort of life to one degree or another. When he finally got married, he gave his wife a list of 22 sets of initials with women he had affairs with, and scholars are still fretting about who were the last 3 or 4. We haven't really figured out who. And he was trapped in that society because he grew up in it. Okay? And again, his dilemma is Onegin's dilemma. And part of it is that he tried to get out in the sense of he was say nonconformist is a little too strong, but he first gets in trouble with the Tsar in 1818 by writing a an ode on liberty. Okay? This was not a liberal democratic society. So what happens? He gets caught because it circulates in manuscript form. Samizdat is not new, belonging to the Soviet period. The secret police pick it up. He is sent to Odessa, or Chisinau in Moldavia, attached to the bureaucracy. He had a nominal post in the bureaucracy. And what does he do? In addition to, well, many things, but he immediately takes after the Governor General's mistress. The Governor General despises him and considers him a worm. And it's his Countess Sobanska, she was Polish. And her job is to spy on him. And then what does he do? He writes a letter to a friend in Moscow saying he's been taking lessons in pure atheism. It seems to me that this is, no spiritual consolation and is the truth. His mail is read. So if that wasn't enough, he gets sent up to Moscow to his estate in Mikhailovskoye just to keep him away from doing anything. And then the other thing he did was wrote a blasphemous poem called the Gabrieliana, about the Virgin Mary and the angel Gabriel, which is circulated around society. And the Tsar knows this. Okay. So he is really a pain to society. But the interesting point is that he manages, for whatever reason, to become a symbol of some sort of resistance. Probably, some of our heroes have feet of clay, but they were heroes in the first place. He becomes enamored of this Natalia Goncharova, and he finally does that. But then again, he wants to escape court life, but he's made a court chamber, which is for Pushkin, who comes from a long boyar family that put the Romanovs on the throne, if I remember my history right. This is a slap in the face socially. Remember that rank and honor are very important concepts.
Well, it's the rank of almost page boy,
Yeah, page boy. And the thing is, why can't he leave the court? Because the Tsar likes his wife, and his wife is pretty.
Right.
So down to the end of his life, he is trying to get away from this social position he's in can't. And the end result of this, of course, is the duel in which he's killed, because people start sending him little notes about being, welcome to the order of the cuckold. And so what goes around comes around. You fooled around with so many people's lives, they're going to get back at you. And he was called out, he called out this Frenchman, Dantes, in Tsarist employ, to get away from the first duel. Dantes married Pushkin's sister-in-law. The accusations kept coming, and he finally called Dantes out again. And this time, the duel was not stopped. And by this time, this pain in the neck of Tsarist society had gotten to the point of fame and notoriety that when he was killed, there was Tsar's specific order that his body be moved from his apartment in St. Petersburg, or from the church in St. Petersburg, to his burying place on his estate in Mikhailovskoye at night, so that there would not be a popular demonstration of this over the fact that the Tsar could have stopped it, but didn't. So this is a very interesting author who pours a lot of himself into Onegin and the narration around him.
We know that Pushkin was killed on a duel. So duel was a very important and common practice for early 19th century Russian society. we need to understand that at this point, not everybody was thinking about their perfumes and taking advantage of their soft voice. We have to remember that Russia went through a very difficult and at the same time important patriotic war of 1812, when Napoleon burned Moscow down. And the generation of people who were fighting Napoleon, it was a very special generation, very young, and it was normal and very expected to die very young and to die heroically. And it was everyday practice as well. I just want to try to translate it to English. One of Pushkin's letters, written around the time he was working on Eugene Onegin. And he's speaking about a friend of his, Alexander Ypsilanti, Greek by heritage. Ypsilanti was in Russian service, and he participated in all Napoleonic war. He lost his hand, and at this time he was 28, and he was a major general at 25. And he left Kishinev, where Pushkin was in exile, to be the leader of the Greek revolt against the Turks. And he ended up tragically. And Pushkin writes about him. And he writes to him, to his friend, can you imagine Alexander Ypsilanti? Now he belongs to history. He is 28. He lost his arm. His goal is noble. What a fate. So Pushkin jealous. This is how he wanted to live, not only smell his perfumes. So this was a very special culture. And of course it was a highly military culture. And of course, honor was first of all important. And duel was everyday practice. Everybody was ready to die to defend their honor, and Pushkin died defending his honor and his status, or his, at least his pride to be an honorable person. And we know that another poet of Pushkin's time, a little bit younger, Mikhail Lermontov, was killed in a duel 4 years after Pushkin. So yes, it is a deadly practice on one side. And this is normal practice. But on the other side, and probably some of you heard that Pushkin participated in his life in 29 duels. And documented. Ones which you know from letters, memoirs, and so on. Probably in more. He never killed anyone. He was never wounded before the last duel. And it was again the other side of this practice. Duel was normal, but duel wasn't deadly always. Normally, there were a number of steps to stop a duel. There was a possibility to at the beginning to stop the whole process. Then there were the possibility not to kill your challenger, for instance, but to wound or to miss. So it doesn't mean that this should lead to death. So in Eugene Onegin, the whole duel from the beginning to the end is not very straightforward. First of all, we remember that it started from the really stupid, not misunderstanding, not joke, but Onegin is behaving badly. He So it's nothing. But step by step, it escalates, and Lenski decided to challenge him. And Onegin is very reluctant. Probably we, I don't know, we should see it in opera as well. So first of all, we have to remember that Onegin is late, 1 hour late. At this point, of course, the duel should be stopped. So this is first attempt by Onegin to stop. Secondly, he brings as a second, as his secondar.
As his second.
Yeah, as his second, he brings his serf. And it's impossible. It should be no duel. Of course, at this point, duel should be stopped, because Evgeny again is trying to kind of change the whole situation, not to go for it. And we remember that duel is not very strict. A normal duel would be on 20 steps. This one on 32, so nobody is going to kill anyone from this distance. And we know that Onegin is not, and normally what would happen, we have this distance, 32 steps. We should have 2 barriers, probably at 10 steps from each other, so the both sides would move, and on the move they can shoot. And if you really want to kill your challenger or your enemy, you should come to the barrier, you should stop, you should aim, and you should kill. But what Onegin is doing, he just starting to walk and he shoots. So he's not going to kill Lenski. It's not serious for him. He's trying to show that he's not interested in this whole process. But somehow, and this is Pushkin's idea, to make the fate work here, he kills Lenski.
Because he can't even get that right.
Yeah, he is for nothing.
Right.
He can't even do it properly.
This completes his CV of superfluity, is that he would do this. You know, it's,
So, of course, it's a very important point. But again, we know that, and for a person of this period to kill a friend on a duel, it's not something that you do easily. We know that one friend of Pushkin, and as a matter of fact, a Decembrist who went through a Decembrist revolt, was exiled in Siberia. He writes in his letters from Siberia that he constantly has the same dream. He is having the same dream, how he killed his friend on a duel. So for Onegin, it should be a huge change in his life, and nothing changes him.
yeah, exactly. May I just ask one more question, please? Just to underscore the irony and also the horrible waste of this. What are the casualty statistics, approximately? How many people die in duels in percentage, approximately?
I can't say exactly, but we know that deadly duels were famous, they're known, and we know more or less about all the most important duels. So I would say maybe 10%, or maybe less.
Yeah, less than 10% result in fatality, which is what makes this all the more horrible in this opera that this has happened.
So it's, first of all, it's a ritual. It's not a way to kill.
Now, really, I think the title of tonight's presentation should have been Eugene Onegin, you know, the superfluous but not the superficial man. I mean, he's certainly, he's deep and he's trying to get out of this problem. And I think both of our scholars have pointed this out, I think, really well. You know, I talked a little bit about it musically. I just want to also interject one thing, too, that there's a theme that runs through Act 1 and part of Act 2 as well. It's the opening in the overture, which is a descending chromatic theme that is very, very nostalgic, but also partly a little bit foreshadowing of something of a fall, just like the fall of Onegin. So this gently falling lyrical chromatic melody shows up, and even Tatiana will sing this as well. And actually, the letter scene opens with that melody constantly transformed. I hate to use a Wagnerian word, I'm sorry, but it almost is a leitmotif that is subject to being transformed at that time. So in light of that, but yet also speaking just musically about many other things, I want to interject. When Lenski sings about love with Olga, it's actually the theme diatonically in inversion, which is interesting. He actually takes the same intervals, spreads them out, and sings upward swoops more and more, and again of how much he loves Olga, which I think is really quite wonderful too to see happen. So, Michael, if you could talk just in any way about what does the letter scene make you think of? A subjective or scholarly response or musical response? Why is it rare in opera? Musically, how does it make you feel? And so forth.
I mean, it's a fantastic scene. It's really, I don't think there's anything quite like it in any other opera. And the whole way through, there's so many different themes. It's like its own little symphony, in a scene. But I actually wanted to get back to this idea you brought up of the falling lines, because it's all over this opera. The Lenski's aria, Kuda Kuda, the main theme is this falling line. This falling line from the beginning of the overture. One of the very important themes in the letter scene is just this scale that goes down. And it's something that actually runs through all of Tchaikovsky's music, just these sort of falling lines, and also these long phrases that sort of strive upwards and then always end up falling in the end anyway.
And they all seem to be set in really lush string writing.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just the master of how to write for strings throughout this whole thing. I mean, it's like listening to the Serenade for Strings with words. And it's marvelous and meaty and always delicious to get into. And I think that's what also helps to underscore the sentiment.
Absolutely, because it's all about people who want these things so passionately, and then in the end they can't have them. So you try to get it, but then you can't have it, and then you're sad. And the musical lines go that way all the time. And actually, one thing, we brought up a little bit this idea of fate that runs through this opera, but this was actually an idea that Tchaikovsky himself was obsessed with throughout all of his letters, and actually he was writing the Fourth Symphony at the same time that he was writing Onegin. And luckily for us, the Fourth Symphony is the only Tchaikovsky symphony that he actually wrote out the program for in words. He writes it in a letter to Nadezhda von Beck, his patron. And he says, this whole symphony is about the theme of fate. It's this sword that hangs over your head, and all you can do is dream, and you try to have these things. And so basically, the symphony is this vast, I'll get back to Eugene Onegin in a second, it actually is relevant, but it's this vast sort of spiritual journey of desiring these things, and every time it feels like you're about to get it, there's this theme this fanfare that keeps coming back. That basically is this really ugly fanfare that keeps coming back and cutting short any beautiful music that starts happening.
It's no wonder this became his first successful symphony.
Right.
Yeah.
But actually, what you'll find right at the beginning of Act 3, at the beginning of the Polonaise in Eugene Onegin, is exactly the same fanfare from the Fourth Symphony. And of course, Act 3 is the final act where everything gets worked out, where everybody's fate gets worked out. And Tatiana herself, in the letter scene, goes on and on and on about fate, fate, fate. It's my fate to be with you. Oh, well, I don't know whether you're going to reject me or take me, but let fate work itself out. And then at the end, she says, oh, well, it's my fate to be with Bremen. I can't take you back. Even though I love you, my fate is decided. And so, but interestingly, in addition to this ugly fanfare that keeps coming back, this falling theme that is the very first music you hear in the opera, and it sounds like nothing. It's just this very gentle little thing with the strings. But it's this falling line that sort of has this weird logic to it. And that's another theme that just keeps coming back over and over and over. So there's this sort of two aspects to fate, this inevitable falling and this sort of ugly fanfare that cuts off, all your aspirations.
We'll need to come back to the idea of fate with both of you, too, please, for Russian literature, please, and to try and tie that in, which is really quite wonderful. That's a fantastic answer.
But, yeah.
I'll take the answer to your question more to a more subjective side. I grew up in what used to be Yugoslavia, and for me, Pushkin letter scene became, was first I discovered it. I was younger than Tatiana is, so I was probably 15 or 16 when I studied Onegin in school, and I was obsessed with that whole notion of pouring your heart out, as I guess lots of young women and girls are. And then I discovered the opera. I discovered many more other Tchaikovsky's pieces through my piano studies. But opera was probably by 16, maybe 17. And from that point on, I think the letter scene in Onegin became for me an epitome of how a real love is felt in a swoop, and it changes your life forever. And nothing else in the world of opera really deals with that level of absolutely innocent love, youth and discovering love for the first time. I can go on for a long time because of over the notion of love with other composers. Can go to Tristan's of this world and Isolde and so on, but this is so pure, so wonderful that nothing else compares to that. Maybe Werther in Goethe, but Pushkin for me was a discovery of something that stayed with me all my life, and it certainly influenced my desire to really bring Onegin back to Edmonton.
Well, we're grateful for that too. I mean, but it's the segmented aspect of it too that's most interesting. And that's what I find remarkable. There's only one other segmented aspect that's involved. I mean, Violetta certainly with her cavatina starts the ball rolling, but surely it's Ariadne of Naxos, where it takes her about 35 minutes to figure out she's falling in love again, and that it's okay at the end of the opera. And I love it when composers get to that point where they're trying to say, we can't just have somebody fall in love anymore. We have to really explain what the mechanics and mental process is, how the body is going to cooperate with the mind with this, and come to some sort of peace with what's going on. That's what I almost see is happening with Tatiana, is that it's that kind of large arc explanatory.
And internally, we had numerous discussions why is opera not called Tatiana, and should we just change it? But you will see when you come to see Onegin that our director really went back to the opera which has 7 lyric scenes, how to connect it so they are not separated vignettes that talk and in a separate way. Our director really had a brilliant idea how to connect them. So I cannot reveal that until you come to see it. But we did connect the scenes, and we really supported the director in this desire to make the 7 scenes work, and the letter scene and the letter as a symbol plays a big part to it.
Yeah, it's very difficult to do. Jelena.
And I thought it's only for every Russian girl. Isn't that important? And I just only can add that I was 14. But the letter itself for Tchaikovsky was, of course, absolutely the major part of his, at least when he started to work on this opera. And probably everybody on the panel knows it very well, but I will remind that Tchaikovsky starts to work on the opera in May 1877. And 2 months before that, early in the spring, he received a letter from a young musical student saying that this girl, and her name was Antonina Milyukova, is madly in love with him. And he writes in one of his letters to his brother saying that he can't be like Onegin. He's not that cold, and he doesn't know what to do. And of course he decided to reply kindly, but saying that no, I can't be in love with you for different reasons. Sorry, do not write me again. And she writes again. And at some point he decided to go and meet her and explain her that no, he can't love her. He is a different person. And he decided to marry her. And on July 6th, just in the middle of his work on the opera, he married her. 3 weeks later, he ran away and wrote to his brother, she's a very good person, she's good looking, she's revolting and disgusting, I can't live with her. And it started, as a matter of fact, a really tragic part of his life, because for him it was constant guilt and it was constant tragedy, and he never get over it.
We were talking in my office a couple of hours ago about this problem of language, and Pushkin's language is like quicksilver. You can put it in your hand, and it's liquid mercury, and it's something there, but it flows out of your hands so inexplicably, leaving you with nothing. But the same is true with Pushkin. I mean, the language itself is the beginning of the modern literary language. It's a synthesis of the speech of the middle nobility. It's got Gallicisms, it's got English phrases in it, like dandy. It's magic, to quote Harry Potter. I have no way of adequately explaining it. You really can't get the sense of what the language is about, not knowing the language. It's just, to me, and I'm not a native speaker. Is that good?
Almost native speaker.
Well, thank you very much for the content. The whole point is that it's got to the point, I don't even bother talking about the poetry and the language when I do the thing for the undergraduates, because it makes no sense. It makes no sense to try to take it apart in English. And we were talking about it, and you had something to say about translations. Not.
So, translations are not translatable. There is, and this is what I found probably more, 42 English, only English translations of this poem. The last one was published in 2011. My favorite translation is by Vladimir Nabokov, who known to the audience as author of Lolita, of course, and a number of novels, but he also translated Eugene Onegin. He was bilingual Russian-English from his childhood, so he was really in a good place. And he came up with a different translation, different from other translations. And first of all, and you will see it now, Eugene Onegin is a small book, 120, 150 pages, depends on the format. Nabokov's translation is much, much longer. I will show you. He decided to translate it in 4 volumes. So this is translation. And what he did, he took practically every simple piece of vocabulary and he gave all possible variations and all possible connections. And he was trying to explain, so this particular word should be, for instance, he's explaining in 2 pages why he is using nuk, ugo, and he said that it could be a corner, it could be a hole. In Russian, it means that this is a place you can live, but not very comfortably, and so on. So, and mentioned Oneginskaya strofa, Onegin stanza. Pushkin didn't want to do it in an easy way. He decided to come up with a very difficult stanza, which he invented specifically for this poem. This is 14 lines with a very specific type of rhyme. And he starts with it, he ends with it, so there is no variations. And so it's very difficult to follow. You need, it's like a sonnet, so you need to fulfill every time. And he does it, and when he speaks in those stanzas, it sounds absolutely easy, natural. And this is game he's playing. He's playing this game of writing very sophisticated, naturally easy, very talkative, chatty poetry. And every time, every sentence is a sentence when after each word, you don't know where it will go. Stylistically, it can go a little bit up, it can go a little bit down, and you feel this game constantly. And this is why it's very difficult to translate. I guess translation is very difficult by nature. Then I tried today to read 5 different translations of the same stanza. It's like, it's flat, it's 2-dimensional. And as a matter of fact, I felt as when I'm given a lecture in English. It's 2-dimensional, I don't have enough language. So this is the same situation. And yes, it's like a quicksilver.
Musically, the best part is that the naturalness of the meter that's chosen, whether that's preserved or not in Tchaikovsky absolutely faithfully, one gets the sense that he writes in multiple kinds of styles. That there's something of a nurse speaking casually, Larina in reminiscence, Tatiana in flights of fancy, Onegin in his sermon, Onegin therefore, supplicating, Lenski in his love, and then the downward swoops when he's about to die in the duel. All of it is supposed to be this same Pushkin, right? And yet Tchaikovsky manages to find ways to metricalize it and work it into a lyrical framework so that it's so much at ease that you're not even conscious of this. Much like I'm gathering when you read the poetry, you're not even aware anymore of its metricality. It's kind of the art that conceals art. And actually, Peter and I were talking about that. We were talking about a certain way that this was done in the Baroque period as well, in its music.
Yeah, we were talking about this, and I picked it up from some article. It's called
Sprezzatura.
Yeah.
Sprezzatura.
Yeah. It was an attempt by the artist to do exactly what you said, to make a very complicated piece and sort of toss it off as if a bit of a trifle. I do this all the time. It's really not that difficult. And concerning language, and the business with Latin, Russian and Latin share the same features of having verbal endings and noun and adjective endings to convey how the sentence sticks together. When I teach Russian, I tell my students, Russian there's a normal word order, but something like the equivalent in English of hand my mother over the fence, a clothespin. Right. The Slavic syntax makes perfect sense. Right? So this is one of the things you get in the verse.